Breathe, Sebastian. Don't you dare stop breathing. Faith's voice echoed through the sterile glass-walled corridor of Reed Global. She had dropped her spray bottle and cloth, her hands, worn from years of manual labor, now cupping the face of the most powerful man in the city. Sebastian Reed, the billionaire whose name was etched in gold on the skyscraper, was slumped against the wall, his navy suit rumpled, his face turning a terrifying shade of blue. To the security cameras watching from the ceiling, it looked like the ultimate scandal, a lowly janitor leaning over a vulnerable billionaire, her lips pressed to his in a desperate, frantic kiss. But Faith wasn't looking for romance. She was forcing oxygen into his failing lungs. As she tilted his head back, her blonde highlighted hair falling over her dark skin, she felt his pulse fluttering like a dying bird. But she wasn't alone. In the shadows by the elevator, VP Marcus Thorne stood frozen, not in shock, but in cold calculation. He didn't call for a doctor. Instead, he pulled out his phone and snapped a photo that would frame a hero as a predator. "I've got you now," he whispered. Faith didn't see him. She only saw a man dying. She had no idea that by saving his life, she had just destroyed her own. If you want to know how Faith survives the scandal and what the billionaire said when he finally woke up, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below. Now back to the story in full. Faith moved through Reed Global like a whisper with a mop. Night shift meant empty hallways, silent elevators, glass walls reflecting a woman no one ever learned to see. Her uniform itched. Her name tag didn't say Faith. It said Alexia, safer, smaller, easier to erase. Every swipe of the floor was a payment plan, a pill bottle, a rent notice folded into her pocket like a threat. Her phone buzzed twice, Nana's clinic reminder, then the landlord's final warning. Faith swallowed the panic and kept her head down. In the day, men like Sebastian Reed decided who mattered in this building. At night, Faith cleaned up after their decisions. She told herself she belonged to the shadows. She told herself invisibility was survival. Still, when she passed the executive boardroom doors, she heard laughter behind the glass and felt that old familiar ache, like a life she wasn't allowed to touch. The call came sharp through the corridor, someone yelling for help, voices cracking into panic. Faith's mop slipped from her hand. The boardroom doors were open, spilling light onto the polished floor like a spotlight. Inside, executives stood frozen around a body on the ground. Sebastian Reed. Billionaire. Untouchable. Turning blue. "Call 911. Someone screamed, like the word itself could breathe for him. Faith didn't ask permission. She shoved through perfume and tailored suits and dropped to her knees. No breath. No pulse. The training she'd almost skipped for being not for people like her snapped into place. Tilt the head. Pinch the nose. Her mouth pressed to his, the kiss everyone would misunderstand. "She's kissing him," someone cried. Hands grabbed at her, a blow landed on her shoulder, but Faith kept going. Compressions. Count. Pray. And then Sebastian coughed, dragged in air, eyes fluttering open. Faith barely slept, still tasting fear and lemon cleaner on her own breath. By morning she was summoned to HR like a criminal. The office smelled like antiseptic and power. Patricia Chin didn't offer a chair. Marcus Thorne stood beside the desk, calm as a judge. A photo slid across the table, grainy security footage. Faith bent over Sebastian, frozen forever in the wrong moment. "Unprofessional conduct involving senior personnel," Patricia said. "Your mouth on an unconscious executive." Faith's stomach twisted. It was CPR. Marcus's eyes didn't change. "And your alias." Another page, her side hustle profile under Alexia. Con artist. The implication hung heavy. Faith tried to speak, tried to explain Nana's bills, tried to remind them he would be dead. "We're done," Patricia cut in, sliding an envelope forward. "No pay. Immediate termination." As Faith walked out, suit-clad employees stared like she'd proven what they always believed. Sebastian woke to white ceilings and the steady bite of machines. A doctor leaned in, voice gentle, rehearsed. "You suffered a collapse. There may have been an altercation." Marcus Thorne stood at the foot of the bed, all concern and control. "You were attacked, Sebastian. We handled it." But Sebastian's mouth was dry with a strange memory. Oxygen that wasn't from tubing heated his lips, a faint scent like lemon and clean floors. The story Marcus offered didn't fit the phantom taste still clinging to him. "Who found me?" Sebastian rasped. Marcus's pause was a fraction too long. Security responded. Sebastian's eyes narrowed, his heartbeat quickening under the monitor's protest. Someone had been close enough to breathe for him. Someone had saved him. If you're still here, don't leave this story to die in silence. Join us, subscribe, and stay with the people who actually care about the truth. Later, when the room emptied, Sebastian asked the nurse for his jacket and phone. His hands shook, but his focus sharpened into something dangerous. On the bedside table lay his watch, his cufflinks, and a small plastic rectangle the hospital staff must have placed with his belongings. A name tag. Scratched, cheap, the clip bent. A single word printed neatly across it, Alexia. Sebastian turned it over like it might confess. It smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and night air. His throat tightened, not from weakness, from anger. Alexia. Not security. Not Marcus. Someone who wasn't supposed to be in that room. Someone they'd buried. Sebastian slipped the tag into his palm and closed his fist around it like a promise. When Marcus returned, Sebastian's face was blank. His voice was steady. "I need the footage," he said. "And I need the employee list for night shift." He didn't say why. He didn't have to. He'd already started the search. Faith learned fast that getting fired doesn't just take your job. It takes your face. It takes your dignity. It takes your right to be presumed innocent. By the fourth day, the rumors had teeth. A blurred screenshot floated through group chats with captions like "Janitor creep" and "caught on camera." The image was grainy, but the story was sharp enough to cut. A dark-skinned woman bent over a billionaire, lips too close, hands on his chest. CPR turned into a headline. A rescue turned into a crime. Her savings vanished into Nana's prescriptions and the past due notice taped to their door like a warning label. Faith sold what she could, an old laptop, a winter coat, then took the first job that didn't ask questions. The diner off 8th and Market hired her because the manager liked that she didn't talk much and she worked like someone running from something. She wore a borrowed apron. Her hands smelled like fries instead of lemon cleaner. The Alexia name tag from Reed Global was gone, but the lie still clung to her skin. It was late afternoon when the bell above the diner door rang and the room shifted. Not loud. Just different. Like the air recognized power before Faith did. She looked up from wiping a table and saw him. Sebastian Reed stood inside her world like he'd taken a wrong turn out of a penthouse. Dark coat. Quiet posture. Eyes too sharp for the dim diner light. The same face she'd seen blue on a floor. Every muscle in Faith's body locked. He shouldn't be here. He walked to the counter like he belonged nowhere and everywhere at once, then looked at her like he'd been searching for weeks. His gaze dropped to her hands, then to her face, and something in his expression cracked, not softness exactly but certainty. "Faith Williams," he said quietly. Her throat closed. "You're mistaken." "No," he replied, voice low enough that the other customers couldn't feast on it. "You saved my life." Faith's knees threatened to give. She gripped the edge of a chair to steady herself, hearing the diner's small sounds, silverware, sizzling oil, fade behind the pounding in her ears. "You shouldn't say that," she whispered. "Not here." Sebastian's jaw flexed. "They told me you attacked me." A bitter laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It sounded like pain. "I did CPR," she said. "And they punished me for it because I'm me." His eyes flicked over her apron, the cheap shoes, the exhaustion she couldn't hide. He looked like someone finally seeing the cost of his world. "You're not the assailant," he said. "You're the only person in that room who acted like a human being." Faith wanted to believe him. Wanted to let his words undo the damage. But believing was dangerous. Hope was expensive. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice trembling despite her best effort. Sebastian reached into his coat pocket and set something on the counter between them. A plastic name tag. Alexia. Faith's breath caught. "Where did you get that?" "It was with my things," he said. "I knew it mattered. And I knew someone made sure I wouldn't meet you." Faith's fingers hovered over the tag without touching it, like it might burn. "You don't understand," she said. "Your people, they're looking for a scapegoat. They already picked me." Sebastian leaned in, the diner's fluorescent light carving hard lines into his face. Then we pick the truth, he said. And we make it loud. Faith stared at him, this billionaire who could walk away and still sleep in silk, and wondered why he hadn't. Then she remembered the moment he coughed back to life. The second his eyes opened. The way they'd found her through the chaos, like he already knew she was the one holding him to the world. Her manager called from the kitchen, Alexia. Table 4 needs refills. Faith flinched at the name. Sebastian's gaze sharpened. They used that against you. Faith swallowed. It was supposed to protect me. It won't protect you anymore, he said. But it might expose them. He slid a card across the counter. No logo. Just a number. If you want to stay invisible, you can, Sebastian said. I won't force you into my mess. But if you want your name back, your real name, call me. He turned to leave, then paused as if the air itself had stopped him. And Faith, he said, looking back. Thank you. It was 2 words no one else had given her. After he left, Faith stood very still. The diner noise returned in a rush. Her hands shook as she picked up the Alexia tag and closed her fingers around it. For the first time since the boardroom, she didn't feel erased. She felt like a match about to strike. Faith called that night from the stairwell outside her apartment because Nana was asleep and the walls were thin and she still didn't trust the world not to listen. Sebastian answered on the first ring. I can't do this if you're just going to write me a check and make it disappear, Faith said without greeting. Her voice was raw. I won't be your charity case. Silence. Then good, Sebastian replied. I don't want charity. I want evidence. 2 days later, they met somewhere neutral, an all-night print shop with buzzing lights and cheap coffee. Sebastian didn't bring a driver. Faith didn't bring hope. They sat across from each other at a sticky table like 2 people from different planets trying to breathe the same air. He laid out what he'd learned. The board had moved fast while he was hospitalized. Emergency votes. Temporary leadership arrangements. Marcus Thorne's name kept showing up in the paperwork like a fingerprint. They're using the unfit to lead narrative, Sebastian said, tapping a file. If I look unstable, the board can force me out. And if you look like a predator, they can bury what really happened. Faith stared at the documents, her imposter syndrome rising like poison. This was not her world. Contracts. Committees. Legal traps written in polite language. You don't need me for this, she said softly. You have lawyers. Sebastian's eyes didn't leave hers. My lawyers work for my company, he said. My company is being eaten from the inside. Faith's stomach tightened. So why me? Because you're outside their ecosystem, he replied. And because you were there. He slid a small recorder across the table. Tell me everything you remember. Every voice. Every face. Every word. Faith closed her hands around the recorder, the plastic warm from his palm. She forced herself back into that moment, the boardroom, the screams, the shouts. There was a click, she said suddenly. Right before he collapsed. Like a pen. Or a cap being snapped. Sebastian leaned forward. Marcus was holding something that day, Faith continued, eyes narrowing with concentration. A silver pen. He kept tapping it. Sebastian's expression hardened. He's been obsessed with optics for years, he said. Always carrying gifts from sponsors. Luxury junk. Faith's mind spun. If he poisoned you. I didn't say that, Sebastian cut in, but the words were already there between them. They moved carefully after that, like people stepping around a bomb. Sebastian used his access to quietly request internal emails and meeting logs. Faith used what she had always had, being unseen. She took a job through a temp agency at a building contracted by a Reed Global subsidiary. She wore the same anonymous uniform. She kept her eyes down. She listened. Executives spoke differently around people they thought were furniture. They said names, made jokes, complained about cleaning staff like they were pests, not people. Faith collected fragments like glass. In a service hallway, she heard Marcus's assistant murmuring into her phone, "No, I told legal, the Alexia angle plays better. The con artist narrative sticks." Faith's throat burned. She turned her face away so the assistant wouldn't see the fury in her eyes. That night, she met Sebastian in the back of a quiet parking garage. She handed him her phone, where the audio was saved, clear enough to make her hands shake. Sebastian listened once. Then again. His face went pale. She said it out loud, Faith whispered, almost disbelieving. Sebastian exhaled slowly, like someone trying not to break. They didn't just let this happen, he said. They built it. Faith swallowed hard. So we tear it down. Sebastian looked at her then, not like a billionaire looking down, but like a man realizing the person beside him was braver than everyone in his boardroom. We go into the viper's nest, he said. And we make them choke on their own lies. Faith nodded, even though her stomach was ice. Because she finally understood something. Invisibility wasn't safety. It was a cage. The day of the press conference, Reed Global's lobby gleamed like a cathedral built for money. Cameras lined the velvet ropes. Reporters sharpened their questions like knives. The building smelled of polished stone and ambition. Faith stood behind a column, hands clasped so tightly her nails left crescents in her skin. She wasn't in a janitor uniform. She wore a blazer, hers, not borrowed. It fit her shoulders like a decision. The name tag on her chest didn't say Alexia. It said Faith. Sebastian stood at the podium, paler than usual but upright, refusing the narrative they'd written for him. Marcus Thorne hovered near the front row in a perfect suit, expression carved into concern. Today, Sebastian began, voice steady through the microphones, we addressed the incident that occurred on the 47th floor and the misinformation that followed. Marcus's eyes flicked briefly to the side, as if checking the exits. Sebastian continued. I was told I was attacked. I was told my rescuer was a threat. I was told the truth would damage the company. A murmur rippled through the room. He paused, then said, the only thing that damaged Reed Global was what we did to the person who saved my life. Faith's heart slammed against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to stay hidden. To let the powerful people speak and the invisible people disappear. But Sebastian turned slightly, his gaze finding the shadow where she stood, and gave a small nod. Faith stepped out. The cameras snapped toward her like predators. A reporter's whisper was loud enough to catch. That's her. The janitor. Faith walked to the podium. Each step felt like walking into fire. Marcus's face tightened, a muscle jumping in his jaw. Patricia Chen sat near the front, lips pressed into a thin line, already preparing the corporate statement in her head. Faith took the microphone. Her voice trembled at first. Not because she was weak. Because the room was designed to make her feel small. My name is Faith Williams, she said. I worked nights at this building. I cleaned the floors you walk on and the glass you look through. I was invisible. Until the night Sebastian Reed stopped breathing. A flash of cameras. A wave of murmurs. Faith continued, forcing her lungs to keep working. I performed CPR. Rescue breaths and compressions. That's not opinion. That's not scandal. That's the procedure. Marcus shifted, smiling tightly. We all appreciate. No, Faith cut in, surprising even herself with the sharpness. You don't get to appreciate me now. You tried to erase me. The room went still. Faith pulled out her phone, hands steady now. And because you assumed no one would listen to someone like me, you spoke freely. She hit play. The audio filled the room, Marcus's assistant's voice, crisp and damning. The Alexia angle plays better. The con artist narrative sticks. A collective intake of breath. Reporters leaned forward, eyes wide. The sound of a lie cracking open. Faith held the microphone closer. That's not a misunderstanding, she said. That's a strategy. Marcus took a step forward, face sharpening into anger. This recording is illegal, he snapped. This is manipulation. Sebastian's voice cut through, cold and controlled. My legal team has already reviewed it, he said. And so has the district attorney's office. Marcus froze. Patricia Chen's face drained of color. Faith looked out at the sea of faces, the suits, the cameras, the people who would decide whether she was a hero or a headline. She felt the old imposter syndrome clawing at her ribs, whispering, you don't belong here. You're just a janitor. And then she remembered Nana's oxygen hiss. The rent notices. The blows on her shoulder while she counted compressions. She belonged wherever the truth needed a voice. I'm not asking to be liked, Faith said, voice clear now. I'm asking to be seen accurately. Silence hung for one beat, then the room erupted. Questions flew. Cameras flashed. Marcus tried to retreat, but security, Sebastian's security now, stepped into his path. Faith stepped back from the podium, legs shaking. Sebastian caught her elbow gently, steadying her without owning her. You did it, he murmured. Faith exhaled, and for the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel stolen. It felt earned. The roof of Reed Global was colder than Faith expected. Wind slicing between the buildings like the city was reminding them it never stops moving. The skyline glittered. Far below, traffic crawled like a living circuit board, tiny lives rushing under giant towers. Sebastian stood near the edge with his hands in his coat pockets, staring out like he was seeing his own empire for the first time. Faith stayed a few steps back. Old habits. Old fear. Even now, even after the press conference, part of her expected someone to appear and tell her she didn't belong up here. Sebastian glanced over. You can come closer, he said, not commanding, just inviting. Faith moved beside him, the wind tugging at her hair. The city lights reflected in the glass walls behind them, doubling their silhouettes. Two people who should have never been in the same frame, now impossible to separate. They'll find another way to twist it, Faith said quietly. People like Marcus don't lose. They relocate. Sebastian's mouth tightened. He's under investigation, he said. And the board members who backed him are being audited. Not because I'm angry, because I'm done pretending this is normal. Faith let that settle in her chest, cautious hope pressing against the bruises left by reality. I keep thinking about the boardroom, she admitted. How everyone watched you die for a few seconds and nobody moved. And how they watched me save you and decided I was the problem. Sebastian's gaze stayed on the city. That room taught me something, he said. It's easy to build a company. It's harder to build a conscience. Faith's laugh was small and shaky. And what about me? She asked. I spent my whole life trying to be small enough not to get crushed. Even when I did something right, I apologized for it in my head. Sebastian finally looked at her then, eyes steady. You weren't small, he said. You were trapped. There's a difference. Faith swallowed, throat tight. I don't know how to be seen, she whispered. Not without flinching. Then we practice, Sebastian said, and the simplicity of it almost made her cry. He reached into his coat and handed her a folder. Inside was an offer letter, formal, clean, impossible, Chief of Human Impact. Benefits. Salary. A mission statement that made Faith's chest ache, ensuring no worker is ever invisible again. Faith stared at the paper. This is too much. It's not, Sebastian said. It's the first thing that feels like enough. Faith looked back at the city, the lights, the people down there who cleaned floors and served coffee and held their lives together with tired hands. She thought about Nana, about the bills, about how easily the world can rewrite you if you let it. I don't want to be your symbol, Faith said. Sebastian nodded once. Good, he replied. Be your own. They stood shoulder to shoulder as the wind pushed against them, and for the first time, Faith didn't feel like she was standing near a glass ceiling. She felt like she was standing beyond it. And if you've made it this far, don't let this story fade like all the others algorithms bury. Subscribe and stay with us. Stories like Faith's only survive when the community refuses to scroll past.